Welcome to another Liquid Bullet Productions. Joining me today is Mr. Simon Morrell. So Simon had a hard upbringing of bullying. Also has gone into martial arts, a martial art background. He's an author of 6 books and also had some big run-ins with Gangsters and IRA. How are you doing today, Simon?
I'm good, thank you, Lee. How are you?
Right, good stuff. So before we get into all that sort of stuff, Simon, can I just roll you right back to the beginning, a little bit of your background of where it started for you and where you grew up, etc.?
We live in North Wales. I've lived in North Wales from a very, very early age. Now, talk about I think the early 70s. We moved from Merseyside to North Wales. I was a victim of bullying from the age of 5, and I remember it vividly. And I'm 57 next birthday, and people say you don't remember that far back, but it was quite a significant period of my life where, because we were from Merseyside and we moved to North Wales, we were a rarity. We were known as Scousers, even though we're not Scousers, we're from Birkenhead. And we were kind of a rarity at the time because, there weren't many kind of English people living in Wales. My father was a bit of a name, or he thought he was a name. He was a businessman. He ran a factory. Thought he was a big shot. So I attracted a lot of attention from a very early age for the wrong reasons. My accent, I was skinny. I didn't have any confidence. Goofy teeth. Like I say, my dad was a big mouth, etc. So I was from the age of 5, people latched onto me. I had no confidence at all. The first time I was bullied, a guy spat in my face and gave me a punch. It was kid stuff. It wasn't a punch. 5 years of age, yeah. But because I wasn't confident, I wasn't naturally confident. From that age, from 5 years of age, my head went down.
What was that sort of a daily thing or sort of weekly thing? What regular was that occurrence?
It was daily. I was in a Catholic school in Morrell. Religion had nothing to do with it, but it was daily. And I think once one kid latched onto me, the next kid came along, latched onto me, and I wouldn't stand up for myself. I wouldn't speak out. I wouldn't. And this went on for, like I say, 5, 6, 7 years of age. I eventually went to my father and I said, listen, I've got to leave school. I knew I was a disappointment to him, not being all very Billy Connolly and what have you, and a disappointment to your father, but I knew it was a disappointment because he was this big name. So, arm up me back, punched, kicked, spat at. So I moved from that school to a local school in Prestatyn, and that was okay for a while. But when people, when you're 9, 10 years of age and you can't hold a conversation and you stutter and you're not a bright kid, but you're desperate to please people. That's just my nature, and people will latch onto that. Some good people who looked after me, some people who, but I found it very, very difficult to make friends. So like I say, my dad moved me from the original school to a new school, but I was in that school for a year, which at the age of 10 isn't a long enough time to kind of forge relationships. And then we were in high school. Now, nowadays, the high school I was in was 1,600 people. And at that time, that was a big, big school. Nowadays, it's not, yeah. So all of a sudden, I've gone from this kid of 5. Like I say, his dad was a name in the local town. His dad was a big mouth, so I answered for that. Then I'm all of a sudden dumped into a school of 1,600 people. Didn't know anyone. And still my head's down, and still I've got no confidence, and still I'm. And the next thing, from the age of 11 onwards, the kind of bigger kids, and you're getting proper smacks in the face, and you're getting proper. Ever.
It's a big age gap, isn't it? From that first year of senior school to the sort of higher end, there's a big age in size and difference.
It is, Lee. Yeah, and it's a shock to your system. When you can't hold your own in a class of 15 kids. And all of a sudden you're in a school of 1,600 people. But a big turning point in my life, there was the punches in the head. There was, there were people who bullied me, who later on I was friends with. And they said,
oh, really?
Yeah, even to now, right? Even now at the age of 57, a kid who bullied me, he's one of my best friends. He's a real, real good lad, a military lad, yeah? But he put my head into a window and smashed the window on me. It didn't break, and years later on, we were friends. And I told him, he said, I never did that to you. I said, you bloody did. And he said, wow, he said, I didn't even know. So people who bullied me weren't even aware they were bullying me. And the one time I stood up for myself, I had a terrible habit of blinking. I was so anxious of blinking all the while. And this kid latched onto me and so I thought, you know what, Lee, I'm probably 14 now. I thought I may as well have a go, because I'm not, by being a coward, I'm not reaping any rewards. So I kind of said, all right, well, I'll fight this lad. And he battered me, he got the better of me. But a massive turning point in my life was when I was 15, extremely shy. And I liked this girl. And I'd never had a girlfriend. I'd never asked a girl out. So 15 years of age. And you can imagine by now, I'm a stick, I'm probably 6 stone at the age of 15 years of age. No good at sport, this, that, and the other. Asked this girl out, and she said yes. Now, it was nothingly. It wasn't the romance of the year. We were with each other for 2 weeks, yeah. But her boyfriend. Now, if nowadays, I think they'd call it stalking, and later on, he was classed as a psychopath. Yeah, he latched onto me, right, and he made my 6 months of my life live in hell. He was a skinhead. Skinheads are good people by and large, right? But this guy was he was not well in the head. This comes full circle many years later on. We met on, but from day one, I was getting kicked and punched by this guy.
Was this jealousy because of this girl?
Sorry, the girl. Yeah. Now the girl had gone 2 weeks. We lasted, but while we were together, she said to me, "I believe you've come across Jimmy." I said, "Who is this guy?" Because I was walking home one night, and him and his mate just popped out of nowhere, and he grabbed me by my collar, and I had no idea who he was. He smashed me against the wall and punched me in the face, and he went, "You're Morrell, aren't you?" And I went, "Yeah." I didn't know who he was, right? And he looked the part. He had the Mod Parker on, and he had the Doc Martens, and he had the crew cut. And at that age, he had tattoos, homemade ones. And he went, "You're going out with Angela." And I went, "I don't really know if I'm going out with her, but so he said, "You stay away from her." And he gave me a beating. Yeah. So then the girl found out about it, and she said, "Listen," she said, "just be really careful." She said, "He carries knives and chisels." And I'd never heard of this, Lee. This is 70-odd, late 70s in Prestatyn, a small seaside town. I said, "What? Oh, he's always in court. He slashes people, this, that, and the other." So anyway, then for 6 months, like I say, my dad was a name, so he fought. And this guy knocked on my door at night, and he'd say, "You're going to come out?" He said, "I'm going to batter you." And Lee, I went. I was that weak. I went, and I got to hiding, yeah. So one day I said to him, "Listen, Jimmy," I said, "you can't keep turning up at my door." I said, "My dad's inside." And what he said chilled me. He said, "Go and get your dad." He said, "And I'll batter him as well." Now, people in that town were afraid of my dad. And he said, "Get your dad and I'll batter him as well." And I'm like, "Oh, Jesus." So I shut the door, and maybe long time ago, Lee, a week, 2 weeks later, whatever, yeah, he come at me with a knife. And I didn't know I could run that fast. I was like a bloody Olympian running through the streets of Prestatyn. And this is long before knife crime was the horrific thing it is now, yeah. And he's coming at me with this knife, and I ran. And I think that it really tipped me over the edge in terms of anxiety and in terms of not looking people in the eye. And like I say, I saw people later on, psychiatrists, what have you, I'm not ashamed of it, and they said, "No, that you're describing a psychopath." So after 6 months, he just dropped the ball. Had enough. That was it. He spoke to my dad, and my dad said to him, "You leave my son alone." And I remember him saying to my dad, "When he's 18 and he's out of your control, I'm going to find him. I'm going to kill him." And I was 16 by now, Lee, yeah. And my dad took a step back. I went, "Wow, I've never seen my dad take a step back from anyone before." So that that was it. Left me then, yeah. But the damage was done. The mold was set, and I was just this kind of, you could say anything to me, do anything to me, and you try. And my sister was a big influence on me, and she said, "Listen," she said, "you can't keep going on like this. Basically, you're laughing stock." And I got it. So she introduced me to karate, and she was going out when she introduced me to it, I didn't realize the instructor was her boyfriend, and it was a ploy to give me confidence, right? So this guy becomes my hero, yeah, and he takes me running, and KUGB, it was Shotokan. I was 15 when I started, and he went, "You've got something here, Simon. You're good at this, and this, that, and the other." And I loved him, absolutely loved him. He was just my hero. And one day I was, like I say, I think I was green belt, and he was second dan Welsh Karate International. I think he was the Welsh team captain, and had an argument with my sister. Stupid argument. Don't even know what was over now. And he dragged me out the factory where we were, and he absolutely battered me. And he did more damage to me than anybody had ever done. And I don't mean, listen, I'd probably call my sister a stupid name, and a clip around the head, I could understand. But he had me on the floor and he was kicking me and I was vomiting. And he picked me up and kicked me again and put me down. And I remember afterwards, he came round and my sister went, "What are you fucking doing?" And he said to me, he said, "You need to train more." He said, "You need to learn how to get out of the way a bit quicker." And you know what, Lee? I remember thinking, karate I loved it. My dad hated me doing it because it gave me identity and he couldn't control me. So I loved it. And I remember thinking, if that's what karate does for you, you can keep it. And I left it, and I still trained myself at home, but my heart wasn't in it. And I'd failed at something else. And that's when at the time, I didn't realize it's now panic attacks. So it sound like an episode of the Waltons. It sound like a real sado. But I was. So one day, I'm like I say, I was the black sheep, and I'm not feeling sorry for myself. I'm just telling it how it is, yeah. And I understood I was a black sheep. I know there was a pecking order in my house. And one day, I was 16. This pretty young girl catches my eye, and she's 14. I thought, she's a nice girl, and she's in my kitchen now. We've been together for 46 years now. I think we have. And I asked her out. Yeah. And I asked her out, and then we went out for a week, and then we finished, and we were still really good friends. And then I asked her out again, and all right, and then we became serious. And I was 14 when I met Julie, and I was 16 and 56 now. So we got a little bit serious, and she I think she saw my dad for what he was, and she was like, she'd stop taking shit off people, and she didn't come out and say it, but grow a backbone. Because I was like, I would go to the factory where my dad was, and someone would make a mistake. I remember my dad when I was 17, somebody in the factory had made a mistake, and he threw a hammer at me, and it smashed behind the wall behind me, and someone in the factory went, "Fucking hell, Peter, you could have killed him." And it was that's the kind of upbringing I had, yeah. So I'd go home and I'd have a beer, and I'd get on Julie and I had moved in together, a little house, and then she'd come in, and in the end, I was that bad with anxiety and fear. She'd dress me in the morning. I couldn't face the days. She's only a young girl herself.
Really?
She's dressing me, and she's driving me to work, and I'm on antidepressants. And I'd go to sleep in the car.
Simon, what age is this here? What sort of age are we talking
This is going on from, but when this happened now, very early 20s, we moved together. We kind of we hit it off straight away. We were soulmates, if you like, and we moved in together. One of my auntie said to me, "That's the most courageous thing you've ever done." Where we lived in our town, it was a very small town, and my dad employed between 30 and 40 people. So it made him a big shot. He would sack people at the drop of a hat. He'd sack people because he didn't like his football team lost that week, or he'd had a drink the night before. So I would go into a pub and people would say, "Oh, you're Peter Morrell's son." And I'd get a crack for it. Your dad sacked my mum. Your dad sacked my sister. Your dad fired my brother. So and not everyone.
You was getting the backlash of his stuff he's doing.
Very much. And that went on till, I'll come to it later on, at the IRA. And I was getting the backlash for it, and not everyone impressed that. And some people impressed that and were lovely, and a lot of people impressed that, and I'm still friends with. But not everyone, And I realised now it was displacement. My dad had taken their income away, so I'm getting the punch for it. Yeah. And I'd go home and I'd say, "Dad, someone else has said this, someone else has said that." And he went, "Oh, you attract trouble, you do." And you know what, Lee? I was a good kid. I never looked for it. I didn't want it. I was no good at it. So in the end, I said,
"Right, Simon, can I just ask a question there, if it's not too personal?" So, what sort of what was that your dad was doing? Sort of, was he sort of collecting money or something like that, or
no? It's funny, right? It was a legitimate business, but because it was a legitimate, my dad had been in prison here, there, and everywhere. I don't hold that against him, yeah, but that gave him a persona. So when we moved to North Wales, he wasn't this man from Birkenhead who ran a sewing factory. He was this, in his mind, he was this Liverpool gangster who'd just come out of Walton jail. Right, so he was like, everyone look at me. He was a peacock. And I saw from a very early age, things back and forth. I saw you're not what you're making out to people. Yeah. So his factory was actually, we made furniture covers. We made the curtains on photo booths, the passport photo booths. We made post bags for the Royal Mail. So it was a legitimate business. But he thought it gave him the right to treat people how he saw fit. and he played on the big. He'd make up stories, and I'd be sitting there. He owned a nightclub as well, like not a nightclub, like a social club, you know, like Phoenix Nights, Peter Kay's Phoenix Nights. And he'd sit there spinning people's tales, and I'd listen to him and I'd think, that didn't happen. You know, about he'd done this in prison and he ran the doors here and he ran the doors there. And he was one of the people who sawed off the craze on Lime Street Station. And I thought, no, that you're full of shit, mate. And then, so around about this time, I said, I'm leaving the area. I mean, he paid me good money to work for him, you know, and it was a legitimate job. So I couldn't afford to give up the job. But I said to Julie, I said, we'll move out the area. And we moved to 30 mile away, and I'd drive to work each day. And my auntie said it was the bravest thing he ever did, because I could go for a drink and I wasn't getting abused.
Yeah, no hassle,
no hassle.
There's new people around you, none of the a break from what you were going through before.
There you go. I wasn't carrying his weight. But I'd go back to the factory and I'd work for him, and I'd be given, you know, even now people said at such an early age you were given such a big responsibility. But yeah, I was kind of, you know, you just, people knock at the door looking for him. And I couldn't fight at the time. And it was, go and get Simon, he'll speak to that fella. Do this, do that, and the other, yeah. So in the end, I was just a wreck. And Judy said, listen, she said, you loved martial arts. Why don't you try karate again? And my body was 24 hours a day. It was in fight or flight. Now, this gets a bit kind of like, you know, Lee, and I've seen people have this, I still wanted to impress him. He was my dad, and I still wanted to impress him, right? And so, you know, so anyway, so my body was in fight or flight constantly. And then I took up karate again. And I didn't, listen, I don't want to be, I was good at it. You know, it was the one thing I could do. But I said to the instructor, I said, I've got an iron deficiency. I said, so I've got to stand by the door. And he knew I was in fight or flight and I had to escape. So it wasn't that situation I was in. It was my whole life. It was my father who put me in it. It was the bullies who put me in it. So I was just on high alert all the while. I was wired like a spring. Yeah.
So,
and
so even when you're in a training environment and you're training, you're looking for exits to get out if need be and stuff.
Yeah. Wow. And it was in here. It was in my self-conscious that I've got to escape because this might happen, or I can't hold a conversation. I'm going to make a fool of myself. And this, that, and the other. And, you know, people are going to think this, that, and the other. And, but I all of a sudden, it probably wasn't even all of a sudden. I always hate this bit because I come across a bit kind of big-headed, yeah? People went, wow, you're good at this. You know, you should compete. You should do this. You should do that. And I started making the proper friends, you know, like the boxers and the hard men who didn't have nothing to prove. And the lads who did, you know, and I started becoming part of a community. And Judy sort of laughed and she went, you're enjoying this, aren't you? And I said, you know what? I love it. And I loved fighting and I loved sparring and I loved wrestling and I just loved the whole community, you know, and the people who were in it. And then my dad was jealous of it. And I remember him saying to me, you're knackered all the while, you're coming in for work knackered. And I said, listen, Dad, because we used to go to the pub afterwards. I said, I don't drink, I only drink Coke. No, he said, I don't mind. He said, drink as much as you want. He said, go to the pub as much as you want. He said, it's karate bullshit that's destroying you. And I couldn't get it. And then later on, someone said, you're putting your head above the, you know, you're putting your head above the
surely you'd be, you would have thought he'd be proud of you. You know, you're not drinking, you're training, you're doing something good, healthy, fit, you know, a good part of life.
And I realized later on, I was 40 when I realized it was jealousy. And I'm still trying to impress him, still trying to. And I remember when I got to a level and I got introduced to Alfie the Animal Lewis.
Yeah. And I think Alfie's coming on for an interview soon. We're just talking with him now.
Is he really? Yeah. I've not seen Alfie for years now, but I did my first stand with Alfie when I was 27, which is quite old to do my first stand. And I did a full 6 stand with him on, here's my tattoo, September 2013. He came down to Fight Fortress. And me and my daughter, she took her 3rd dan, and he took me through my 6th dan. And I loved Alfie. He was always very kind to me. Hard in training, you know what I mean? Didn't give you an easy run in training, but always compassionate, always a nice man. But so I got accepted into his association to start my own club at Brown Belt.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, wow, I'm starting my own karate club. And it was 4 mates and it was in a community centre. But it was godly, you know what I mean? And it's like, and Judy was laughing and she went, you're doing all right, aren't you? So then I got into Jeff Thompson stuff, and I've got a little girl now. She was Lucas. She was 3.
Sorry, Simon. Just I always get confused. There's 2 Jeff Thompsons. So
yeah, go on. Coventry Jeff.
Right, because you got one who was the competition fighter, wasn't there? And there's the other Jeff Thompson.
Yeah. I was telling Julie, funny enough, yesterday, because we talked about this, and she went, "Oh, I didn't know there were 2 Jeffs." I said, "Yeah, one was a great traditional fighter. You got the MBE or the OBE, one of the
That's
other.
it, yeah.
It was Coventry Jeff, Watch My Back, yeah." So I started reading Watch My Back, and I thought, wow, this guy's been through so much, and he's you know, it's similar background. I'd never done the door. The stuff I go into later on didn't need to do the door, yeah. But I liked how he was depressed and anxious, and he became this doorman, and he became his. So then I read Fear, and then I read The Elephants in the Twig. Now I say this a lot, yeah. I was getting ready for my black belt of Alfie. I was flying. My dad hated it, right? But I'm at the point now where I don't care. I have to do this for me, and I've stood in front of people for you in trade shows in America. People trying to lump him because they dropped $7,000 off him, and I'm jumping in front of them and dragging people off my dad and pushing them away, yeah. And I'm answering to people all the while. He just stole from everyone, yeah. And I'm always the guy who I say this a lot, yeah. My dad started to accept me when I became something of worth, when I could fight, yeah, and when I could say to people, "You're not doing that," and when
so you've sort of become from him bullying you to now he's protector.
Yeah. And even you know, like I say, we're at a trade show in America, and this fella comes around. I'm sitting there reading my book, and this fella goes, "You piece of so and so, you robbed $7,000 off me." And he goes to me dad, and I'm up and I'm grabbing the fella and I'm throwing him to the floor and I'm throwing him away, yeah. And all of a sudden, my dad's like, "Well, hold on, well, Simon can do a bit here, so let's keep him in reach." Yeah.
So now he's got that respect for you. He's got the respect for you now.
No, yeah, Lee, he had the respect, but he was still engulfed with jealousy, and I didn't realise till I was older. So, so I'm getting ready for my black belt, and I'm flying, right? And we've got the little girl, we've got another one on the way. I've now got my own full-time studio, only a brown belt, but I've got full-time club, working in the factory. Read everything. Jeff Thompson at that time, I didn't know him, but if you're a music fan, he was my Springsteen. And if you're a Liverpool fan, he was my Steven Gerrard, yeah. So 6 months to go before my black belts, flying, and I'm out for a run on a Saturday night, and I get in, all right, and I had a little can of Guinness, whatever, and I get in the bath, and I'm this, that, and the other, and I had the biggest panic attack I had ever had in my life, and it came from and who are you to go before Alfie the Animal? Who are you to go to Manchester to fight? Who are you to? And I realized many years later that was my dad. Yeah. But in here, so I called Julian and I said, "Listen, love," I said, "I've got something to tell you." And we were known now in our community. And I said, "I'm not doing my black belt." And she said, "What do you mean you're not doing your black belt?" And I said, I'm kidding myself. I said, and I was upset. And Julie was upset. And she said, "But listen, Lee, I'm going to say what." She said, "People know you're good. People know what you do." And I said, "No." I said, I'm fooling myself. So I said, I'll just stay in the factory. Now, the factory was where we worked. That brought me down. Yeah, but I said, I'll just stay in the factory. So she says, I love Jeff Thompson by this time. Read that guy from Coventry, read his books again, because they really helped you. They bought you out the wardrobe. They bought you out there, you know, they brought you back into read his books again. And I said, no, I said, they can't help me. I said, there's nothing can help me, Julie. I said, I'm quite happy being brown belts. You know what, Julie said, I got to last brown belt. I got much further than anyone thought I was going to get. Much further than I thought I was going to get. I'm done. And I went to bed. And I was depressed for a week, yeah. And I didn't train that week and this, that, and the other. And listen, you're going to have to, excuse me, I always get emotional at this bit. I can't tell the story if I'm getting a lump in my throat. It's a Saturday morning. I was sitting in bed having a bit of tea and toast a week after I'd thrown it all in, and our phone goes. And it's the old days before mobile phones. That's how old I am. I remember when the moon was just fields. That's how old I am. Right? I remember running water being invented. So the phone goes, and the answer phone, yeah. And this man goes, "Hello, Simon. Hello, Julie. I just wanted to speak to, and Julie jumps out of bed and she looks panicked and she picks up the phone, right? So I can't hear who it is. So I get out of bed and I said, what's going on, Ju? And she went, yeah. She said, do you mind? Are you sure? So she gives me the phone and she went, so it's Jeff Thompson. And I said, Jeff Thompson phoning me? I said, why would Jeff Thompson phone me? And she went, speak to him. So he comes on the phone. And honestly, Lee, it's like Bruce Springsteen phoning you. And I said, is this someone having a laugh at me? Like, I said, this a mate who? And he went, no, he said, it's Jeff. I said, how do you know about me? And he said, your wife wrote to me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I said, what? And he said, what you've been through in your life and what you've done and where you are. And you are this close. And he said, you know what? I'm in a black belt. He said, it's going to change your life. And he said, you just have to take it. And he said, you can. He said, listen, he said, I would take it for you if I could. He said, and Julie would take it for you. He said, but it's not going to make any difference. You have to take it. And I've never to this day, I said, what was in the letter? And he wouldn't tell me. And to this day, I don't know what was in that letter, but it changed my life. And I said, all right, I'll give it a go. So put the phone down. He said to me, I'm going to phone you all the while. He said, we're going to top you up. He said, because this is going to change you. And I said, right, okay. And I put the phone down. And Julie said, are you angry with me? I said, how could I be angry with you, Ju? And I said, I'm going for a run. And I went for a run. And I got back on the bag. And 6 months later, we went down to Manchester. I was terrified, right? And I got in front of Alfie Lewis and I did my black belt. And I went, wow, this is like, wow, in front of Alfie the Animal Lewis, another hero of mine, yeah? And I did all my basics. I did 5 rounds of kickboxing. And wow. And I got home and Jeff phoned me up. He went, I told you you'd do it. He said, this is the start for you. And I said, no, I got my black belt. He said, no. He said, this is the start for you. And I didn't know where it would lead me, you know. And I'm not saying I'm anything special. I don't mean that. But so then he said, you know, my confidence is good. And I'm now speaking to people. I'm not stuttering. We opened a full-time gym. We raised some money. We opened a full-time gym. We had a little bit of a wobble on the way where a friend of mine ripped me off. And he turned out to be a drug dealer. And he owed me a lot of money. And this is a guy who six years ago couldn't have an argument with someone. And all of a sudden, I'm taking on this gang of drug dealers because he owed me a lot of money, right? And I said, I don't back down anymore. I said, either you leave, because I'm not leaving this. He lived next door to me. Oh. Anyway, 2 years that went on for, and I broke the back of them. 7 of them come to me one day. 7 guys, heavy guys, to teach me a lesson. And there was just me and my daft wife stood behind me in the drive. And she's not mouthy, Julie. We're not like this type of people. And I remember saying to them, I don't know what you're doing here because none of you are going to get what you think you've come for. I said, because I'm not fucking bothered by either of you, excuse me swearing on your podcast. I'm not bothered by any of you. And inside, Lee, you know the score, right? I was terrified. I said, I'm not bothered by any of you. I said, first person makes a move to me. I said, they're going to get it. And they were like, whoa, you've got us wrong. I said, I haven't got you wrong. I said, 7 of you come to my house with my 2 young children inside on a Sunday afternoon with my children inside. I said, you best leave now. And they left, right? And I went inside and I was shaking because I was terrified. And Julie went, it's a little whiskey for you. She said, you did great there. And my confidence grew again. And I'm no longer...
I suppose as well there, Simon, they knew you meant business. Like you weren't being scared or shy. You was confident to say...
Yeah.
You meant it. If they you, they're going down.
Yeah, I meant it.
So sometimes that confidence is the fear factor for people, isn't it?
It is, Lee. And that's what saw me through. And I say this to people now. People say to me, they had a lucky escape. I'm not going to beat 7 people. I'm not a stupid person. 1 person isn't going to beat 7 people. Yeah, but it was that fear factor. And I've been taught to splay, to make myself look big. I'm not a big lad at all, but you splay. And you're aggressive and you spit and you fucking this and fucking that, right? And you point. And they're going, this lad's he's not afraid of us. So it's a fear factor. And like I say, when we shut the door, I was a different person. I was shaking and Julie went, you did good there, kid. You know, you did all right. So the next day, I've never thought I was anything. I never go out then and go, yeah, I saw out 7 people. That's not my making, yeah? I just thought, well, I'm all right. I'm a black belt. I've just seen down a drug gang. I'm all right. So we open our studio. I'm getting respect. I'm sparring. I'm 9 stone by this time. I'm sparring heavyweight boxers, you know. And then Jeff Thompson phones me. Jeff Thompson phones and he said, come down to Coventry and do your second, Dan. And I thought, oh, that's asking a bit much. I said, what do we have to do? He said, you've got to do, it was pad work and basics. He said, then you've got to do an hour of grappling off fresh opponents each time. And then you have to do 10 full contact kickboxing rounds. And I went, yeah. I said, yeah, go on, then I'll do it. And Julie went, yes. So I spent, this is a bit crude, I spent the next 6 months every single morning, my head down the toilet, because it was right. And I kept going, look, I've got my black belt, I don't need to prove myself. And I knew that I had to do it. So I go down to Cov on a Thursday morning, me and Julie again, she's a bloody jinx. Every time there's trouble, I turn around, Julie's there. She's bad luck, I'm telling you. So I go down to Coventry and we do the grappling, and then we do the basics. And then Jeff went, I remember there's a guy called Justin Gray, and Jeff sent me down videos, before download, sent me videos of people I was going to fight. I remember looking at Justin and saying to Julie, out of all of them, he's the one I don't want to fight. You can say this lad, he was European champion. So she said, what do you do if you have to fight him? I said, I'll fight him. I said, but I don't want to. So at the end, when it came to my grade in the 10 3-minute rounds, Jeff went, right, he said, I need 2 fighters. He said, everyone else go outside. So he said, Lee, he said, we'll have you. And he went, and Justin, I went, oh, God. So I thought Justin Gray, right? And in the 3rd round, it's the only time I've ever been knocked out. He knocked me out cold. And I went back to Driscoll. I was fighting this, and I went back to Driscoll Gratty, and I brought my guard down to Hecate, to my hip. And he come underneath, and he knocked me out for an uppercut. So they brought me round, and then they said, you got 7 rounds left. They said, your choice, you can carry on now, or you can go home, have a rest, and come back and just start off from here. And I try and be honest all the while, yeah. And I think if I'd have gone home, I don't think I'd have gone back. Yeah. I don't think I could have summoned it to go back. So I said, no, I'll do them now. And I fought another 7 rounds, and I don't remember any of it. The only thing I remember
was you still in a little bit of a daze, or?
I was just, yeah. I mean, I did all right. I've been told, yeah. Now I can't remember any of them rounds. The only thing I remember is afterwards we were in Coventry Boys Club, and the motorway was running past. I think it was the M6, maybe, or whatever it was. And I said to Julie, when did he build a motorway in Prestatyn? And she went, what? And I said, and where's my dad? My dad's normally in work on a Saturday morning. And she went, Simon, it's Thursday, you're in Coventry. I went, what am I doing in Coventry? So she went, Jeff, come here. So Jeff talked to me, and Jeff's got a lovely, calming voice. And he went, you remember you've just done 10 rounds of fighting? And I went, who with? And he went, right. He said, you've had a nasty knock to the head. He said, you've got adrenaline. He said, but you've got your second dan. So, all right, okay. I said, have I done my second dan? And then it come back to me, yeah. And then I go home, and then I'm flying again, yeah. And then Peter Considine, a great guy, Peter Considine, and we go to train with him in Coventry. And he comes down, and then he took me from the 3rd dan. So then Jeff says to me, shameless plug here, Lee, if you don't mind, right? So Jeff says to me, write it down, Simon. And the only thing I was good at in school, other than getting punched, was English. I could write. So he said, write a little piece for me. He said, I'll see if I can get in a magazine. So I wrote a piece about fear. And he said, it'll take me a few weeks to get back to you. So the very next day, he phoned me on a Sunday morning, and it was a 6-page article. And he said, Simon, he said, you're a writer. And I said, I just like to scribble. He said, no, he said, you're a writer. And he said, listen, we'll put this in Martial Arts Illustrated. And it got 6 pages. He said, you need to write a book. So I laughed, and I went, why would I write a book? But I wrote a book, right? So then we've got our gym. I've done my 3rd dan, and I've got my book, and I'm getting letters throughout the world. And I don't want to be a big head. That's not me. And Jew and look what you've done. And I made the worst mistake of my life, and it haunts me to this day. PTSD, right? I'm in the factory working for my dad, as well as all the other stuff I've got going on. And he comes out. Now, my dad, right? Like I say, I've got a brother and sister, and they are the golden kids. But I'm desperate to impress my dad. Even now, I think I was 30 odd at the time. And he comes out. He said, listen, son. He said, son, I've done it this time. He said, I'm going to lose my house. He said, I've borrowed up to the hilt. And he said, I want to retire. He said, but who's going to take the factory on? I said, I don't know who's going to take the factory on. Muggins here, right? He said, can you borrow a few quid and buy it off me? I said, how much? He said, just under £500,000. So I go home, right? I shouldn't have done it, but, I did it. And so I said to Julie, what do you want to do? She said, whatever you want to do, so we'll do. So we borrowed £500,000. We bought the factory off him.
Blimey.
And he goes away, yeah? And he goes away for 2-3 weeks. Thank you, son. I love you. And you saved me in your mum's house. And it's my mum. They're going to lose a house because they borrowed on the factory, right? I'm not going to see my mum homeless. And my sister ran for the hills, and my brother wanted nothing to do with it. So we don't want to see my mum and dad homeless. So he disappears for maybe 3 or 4 weeks, yeah? Now, I knew, Lee, that he sailed close to the wind. You know, and like I say, I dragged people off him and all this. So after 3 or 4 weeks, he starts coming around the factory, and all of a sudden, like, he tells people, I'm just there as a puppet. I'm just there for tax reasons. I haven't really bought the factory. It's all just this, that, and the other. And I let that slide, right? And I think, I'll just shut up. It's my factory. So one day I'm sitting there. Now, you excuse me, it's accumulation of things now, right? Phone goes. And this big Scouse voice says to me, you know, that's Simon. He said, is your dad there? Your old fella there? I said, no, it's not his anymore. He said, right. He said, where's the 10 grand you owe me? No, I knew nothing about it, Lee. Promise you I knew nothing about it. And I said, what 10 grand? He said, don't play silly buggers at me. He said, we gave your dad 10 grand a few months ago. And at the time, we made bouncy castles, right? And a lot of people in Liverpool, and usually Dorman, bought bouncy castles, right? To hire out the weekend. You tell me. So he said, we've ordered castles off him he said, we gave him cash. And I said, I don't know anything about it, Paul. And he went, we went from 0 to 60 in like a second. He said, we're over to see you. I said, well, hold on. He said, don't you hold on me. He said, your dad thinks he's a boy. Your dad thinks he knows this person, that person, that person. We're over to see you in an hour. And I went, that's all right. Fucking hell. So I go out into the factory, and I said to one of the lads who'd taken stuff to their car for my dad a couple months earlier, I said, what are these lads like? And he said, why? I said, because they're coming out. He said, I'm going home. I said, why are you going home? He said, because they have shotguns in the car. I said, yeah, but he said, no, he said, I'm going home. And he went, and I didn't blame him, right? So I go into the office, and I said to the secretary, have a day off. Long time ago, can't remember the girl's name now. Nice girl. Sent her home. And I'm sitting there on my own, right? And 2 of the guys in the factory who worked in the back of the factory, they said, we'll move our machine by you. And I said, no, it's not your problem. No, we'll move our machine by you, so you're not on your own. So I phoned Julie up, and I said, listen, Ju, I said, this is Julie all over. I said, I might be home for tea. So he said to me, why are you going training? I said, no. I said, I think I'm getting shot. So she said, what do you mean you're getting shot? I said, well, I said, my dad. So Julie said, should I take the kids to my mum's to come down and sit with you? And I said, no, not this time, Julie. I said, you're not. No, she said, you can't be on your own with this. Anyway, long story short, an hour later, these 3 fellas walk in. One of them is massive, right? One of them stands by the door of the office so I can't get out. Now, I'm not going to try and get out because this isn't going anywhere. This problem's not going away. The lad next to me, and the story verifies itself in a minute, his leg is going 100 miles an hour and he's got his hand in his pocket. Yeah, and the main guy who's owed the money sits in front of me. So the lad on the door, he said, them 2 lads there, he said, they don't normally work there. He said, they're here to back you up, are they? I said, no, Dominic. I said, we've just moved them round. He said, because if they get involved, they're getting it as well. I said, I understand. I said, right. I said, Paul, I said, I know you owe the money. I said, I don't owe it you, but I know my father owes it you. I said, so someone has to pay it, and it looks like it's me. He said, where is your dad? I said, you don't need to worry about where my dad is. He said, is he hiding, Simon? I said, yes, he's hiding. He said, right. And he calmed right down, right? He said, okay. I said, I can get you this money, or I can get you the goods. I said, it's going to take me a couple of months. I said, I haven't got that kind of money around. So he goes, you cheeky bastard. I said, you can take it or leave it, Paul, because I haven't got the money. I said, but I'll get it, yeah. And he went, yeah, all right. I said, now, can you do me a favour? I said, this gentleman sitting here, probably Lee, I probably went, this gentleman sitting here. I sound very brave now. Can you tell him? I said, can you ask him to very, very slowly take his hand out of his pocket and to stop his leg twitching? I said, because I know what he's got in his pocket. And the lad turned around at me and was, you're a cheeky bastard, you. I said, what choice do I have? So that lad is now, he's actually away now. He murdered someone, shot a guy 5 times over a game of pool.
Over a game of pool?
Over a game of pool, yeah. While he was on the run, yeah. So people say he wasn't going to do anything. Yeah, the people who said they weren't going to do anything, Lee, they weren't the people sitting in that seat. I was. Well,
if he had that in his pocket, he didn't bring it to, if he didn't even get it out to shout around, you know the intention was there, don't you?
Of course, yeah. And it's
just for show, he would have been having it out from showing it around.
Yeah, it'd be threatening me, wouldn't he? He was ready to
Exactly.
pull it. Yeah?
Yeah.
So when we calmed it down, and then he says to me, he said the funniest thing, right? He said, we got German Shepherds. He said, are they your German Shepherds in the yard outside, Simon? And I went, yeah. He said, don't you think they should have brought them in? He said, at least you had a bit of a chance. And I went, you know what? Didn't even think of that. So he starts laughing. He said, you're a little fucker you are, aren't you? So then they said to me, listen, they said, you're good as gold, you. They said, we don't want your old fella involved. They said, get the stuff for us. And they said, anything you need now, you're with us now, right? Anything you need. And I said, no. I said, with respect to you. I said, no, mean with respect. I said, I'm all right. I said, I'm on my own. I said, I don't need a gang. I don't want to be. And they said, no, we respect that as well. They said, but you need anything, come to us. And I said, all right. I said, I'll bear that in mind. But it's not me, it's not me. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them people. I'm not saying there's anything right with them people. I look after myself. I've learned to be self-sufficient. So lo and behold, right, I'm good as gold again. This is this one. Where are we? An everyday warrior, right? And I'm very, very candid about, you got that? Yeah. Very, very candid about what happens to me next. My wife stood up through me for everything, yeah. So I knew that my dad had done business with people in Ireland, and a guy phones me up one day from Liverpool, and he said, listen, kid, he said, just want to ask you, he said, does your dad owe people in Ireland money? I said, not that I know of, Andy. He said, can you ask him? He said, because I'm telling you now, he said, you don't want to owe these people money. I said, why? He said, they're the big Catholic clan. I said, the IRA. He said, don't say it over the phone. I said, no. I said, I've got nothing to hide. This is the IRA. He said, yeah. I said, all right. I said, see what happens. So, Lee, maybe a week, 2 weeks later, the phone goes, and it's a phone call. It's a phone number that it's my own personal phone. And this fella's, he's good as gold, right? He goes, good morning to you, Simon. Can't do the accent, right? He said, you know this guy in County Wexford, £60,000? And I said, nope, I don't know. He said, all right. He said, well, your dad does. He said, and you're in the chair, so you're paying it. And I said, okay. I said, how do I know you're real? And you know what, Lee? It made me sick. He went, your daughter's called Luca. Your son's called Cy Tyson. They go to Uskall Elvod. Your wife drives a Frontera. You drive a silver BMW. He told me everything. I said, how long have you followed me for? He said, a month. He said, and given what you've done in the past, he said, we're very disappointed you didn't spot us. I said, all right, fair enough. I said, hypothetically, what if I don't pay it? He said, we put you in a van. He said, we torture you. He said, and we take you back to Ireland. He said, you'll be buried in the hills. He said, no one ever see you again. And I said, shit. And he said, good luck to you, Simon. He said, I hope you find it. So I put the phone down. I said, you know what, you? I said, they might be bluffing. But by now, in this industry, we know a couple of people. Yeah, we're not gangsters. I don't mean that.
So the thing is, though, when you got kids involved and it's not just yourself and your family, do you want to take that chance?
You get it, Lee. Exactly. You're 100% there, Lee. 100%. You want to take that chance. But I phoned a guy who did security in Ireland, and I phoned a guy who was ex-military, and I said who the guy was who was owed the money. And you know what, Lee? In all fairness, he was owed the money. My dad had the money, and he'd paid off the Jaguar, and he'd paid off his mortgage, and he'd gone into Florida for a month. Right? So the man was owed the money, and I phoned him up. I knew him. And I said, I know you owed the money. I said, what a shit thing to do. I said, you've met my kid. Because I knew the guy. I said, you've met my family. You sat at the table with my family. Oh, he said, it's not my debt anymore, Simon. It's been passed on. I said, yeah, I get it. So anyway, I phoned the ex-military
this
guy.
is your own dad doing this to you, isn't it? Your own dad doing his positions.
Yeah. As I phoned him, I said, Dad, you better come down the factory. And he came down, right? At one time, he couldn't keep him away from it. And he come in and said, listen, I said, this is what's happened. And you know what, Lee? He went as white as a sheet. And you know what he said to me? He said, don't give him my address, will you, Simon? And I said, right. And he said, your mum's up there. And I said, what about my wife, Dad? I said, what about Julie? What about your grandchildren, Luca and Cy? So what about them? Oh, don't give him my address. Don't give him. I said, you know what, Dad? Fuck off. I said, get out my factory. So the military guy came back, and the security guy came back. And I use humor when I'm frightened or nervous. I use humor as a defense. They said, "Have you got that kind of money?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I keep tripping over bundles of £50 notes in my office." I said, "Of course I haven't got £60,000." The guy actually said to me, "I'll settle for £48,000 because a deal had done with my dad previous." So they said, "Can you get it?" And I said, I don't, if I have to, I have to. I said, because no one's going near me kids. So I'll tell you what, Lee, that was probably, I'm going to say 11 o'clock in the morning. And when I got home, right, we didn't have a big house. We only had a little bungalow. There were cameras all over my house and security lights. And my father-in-law had been down there. He hasn't got money, yeah. And he'd put the whole house around with cameras, Julie's dad. And I said, check for £11,000 on my dining room table. And he said, that's all I've got, Simon. And I said, you don't have to do that, John. He said, yeah. He said, it's yours. So I said to my dad, you're going to have to cough up something, Dad. And he gave me, I think he gave me £3,000. And you know what, Lee? Some years later on, he sued me in court for it back.
You're joking. So
he sued me in court for it, yeah. £3,000. So we remortgaged our house. And we ended up losing our house, but we paid the guy. And I still say this, the guy shouldn't have involved children, right? The guy knew me, but he was owed the money, you know. Yeah. So one thing led to another then. And when it was all over and done with, my dad came back on the scene and there was another person had ripped off and another person had ripped off. And in the end, I said, you just fuck off, get out of my life, right? Yeah. So the next thing's a knock on the door one Saturday morning. It's a taxi. There's a letter off my dad. You're a scumbag. You've robbed me. There was no IRA. You took that £48,000. I hope you get cancer. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. And then he went, you kid. This was ongoing over 6 or 7 months. Yeah. Not every day, but most days. A taxi pulling up and the taxi driver would go, hey, lad, I'm sorry. Sorry, sir. You're a good man. Here's the letter off your dad. Your kids hate you. Everyone knows your kids hate you. You're a phony. I adore my kids. Me and my kids were so close. And I ended up drinking, and it became a little bit easier to have a glass of wine every night. And then it was 2 glasses of wine. And then it was every night. And then it was a little brandy. And, I defy anyone to live with the pressure I was under. Defy anyone to not kind of to wobble. And in the end, it was too much. And I wasn't, I say this, I wasn't an alcoholic, but it was an emotional thing, where you think,
like
God,
a numbness, sort of to numb the process of all them bad thoughts, I suppose.
There you go. It was to numb it. It was to numb it. And then all of a sudden at 2 o'clock on a Monday afternoon, you're going, oh, watch a film and have a little brandy. And Julie's like looking sideways out of her eyes to me, yeah. And in the end, I was going to bed and I have PTSD. I have them now. I started having nightmares. And I'd flare up at Julie in the night. And then it comes to a crunch and she said, you know what? She said, when we were younger, she said, you promised me when the kids had gone, you'd take me on a cruise through the icebergs. That's her big thing, yeah. And she said, just me and you. And she said, you're not going to do it. She said, because you're going to die. And I said, what a horrible thing to say. And she said, you're going to die, Simon, if you don't stop it. Yeah. And I went, right. And we had a row that night. And I said, you know what? I said, I'm off. I said, I'll go and sleep. We had a gym. I said, I'll go and sleep in the gym. And I went and sat in the gym. And we had photographs of me and the family and I and the kids on holiday. I remember sitting there thinking, what a fuck up I am. Sitting there with a bottle of brandy in my gym, shivering because I haven't got a bloody proper coat and all that. And I phoned Julie that day. And this is the worst part of my life, bar none. I said, will you give me another chance? And she said, you got to stop drinking. And so I went to the doctor and he said, listen, he said, what are you drinking? And I told him, and Julie's behind him going, no, he's not. She said, you can treble that. And I said, really? She said, really, Simon? She said, you're on the brandy all the while. I said, okay. So he said, don't stop overnight, Simon. You've got to taper. And I went, no.
Wean off it.
Wean off it. And I didn't, Lee. I said, I'll have 1 glass of wine and I'm done. And the following day, there were kids on my chimney playing banjos and waving to me. And the BBC were making a film of chimneys waving to me. And I called Julie up. I said, look at this. She said, Simon, there's nothing there. And I was hallucinating. And the next thing, there was a rat jumped out the wardrobe at me. And the lampshade was talking to me. And I could hear music that wasn't being played. And the next thing, 7 policemen come through my door. And I thought it was hallucination. And they went, no, we're here for you, Simon. And they said, you're very, very poorly. They said, we need to get to his hospital. And I was shaking. And the policeman, good as gold, he went, I went to get a glass of water and it's all over me. And he went, yeah, okay. And he gave me a glass of water. And he tied my laces. And he said, will you come to hospital? 3 police cars, 7 policemen. Later on, someone had told him what I did now. I was like, fair Dan, and whatever. So I go to hospital. And you know what? Everything that happened in my childhood, I saw. And I said to the doctor, look at all the kids. My favourite story as a kid was Peter Pan. I said, look at all the kids, Peter Pan. He went, Simon, there's nothing there. And then
So Simon, can I just ask what caused all these hallucinations? They're coming off of the drink.
Coming off the drink. Yeah, I should have just gone slow. And I just went, no more. So the hallucinations were the withdrawal. But all the post-trauma, all the things I'd seen in my life came back to haunt me. Yeah. And so one of my favourite films was The Elephant Man. And the Elephant Man was sat on the bed next to me talking, but he didn't have a mouth. I can see all this now, yeah. And then I walked down to the labour room, to the maternity ward, and there were men giving birth. Because they didn't have the right part to give birth, there was blood everywhere and they were screaming and babies trying to get out. And then the worst part was two people. My dad always said to me, you'll end up in jail, you. And I'm a good kid, you know what I mean? You'll end up in jail because he was in jail, in and out of jail. Don't hold that against him. You'll end up in jail, you. He actually said to me, he said, I've arranged for you to be raped in Walton jail in the showers. Yeah, you tell me, right?
Oh.
Yeah. So next thing, two fellas from Walton jail came to see me. They're going to cut me throat. They weren't. This was here. Yeah. And I said to the warden, I said, I've got to get out of here. And I phoned Julie, said, you got to come and get me. Now, we laugh now, right? She said, every 5 minutes you were on the phone. For real. She said, they're coming for me, Julie. The men from Walton jail are here. And in the end, she said, it was so sad and we were crying so much. Her and my sister started laughing. And she said, she come to see me the next day. She said, I had chocolates all over my face, no shaving. I said, they've been here to see me again, you know, Julie. Got to get me out of here. And gradually the alcohol came out of me. I'm a very lucky man, right? I went back to the doctors and I just packed it in all together. I came out of hospital. I was all right, yeah. But when I came round, I'm lucky. I had a very lucky escape because now, 10, 15, 18 years later on, because my kid's 18 now, I have a glass of wine and I'm all right because I don't need it. There's no demons there. But when I woke up, my daughter was sat there. Me and my daughter are just like, like I say, we're so close. I wasn't very nice to my youngest son, and I'm not horrible to my kids. Love my kids. He didn't want me to come home. He was only 8, I think, my lad say. And Julie was there. And in the next seat was my dad. And I remember looking at him, and I remember thinking, you're here for guilt. You know you put me here. Yeah. I drank. It was me. Nobody put a gun to my head and but more or less they did. I thought, you're here for guilt. I can see it written all over you. And I couldn't walk. I'd killed all the nerves in my feet, so I couldn't walk. So they put me I had to go everywhere in a wheelchair. And my dad went, look at the state of you. He said, call yourself a fighter. And you think, you know what? You're not being Mickey from Rocky here trying to G me up. You're taking a piss out of me. So he went, trying to put me down, yeah. So then I said, Lucas said to Julie, let him come home. And she said, my youngest son said, I don't want you home, Dad. I said, no, I get that, son. I said, give me one chance, kid. I said, because I'm your dad. And what you've seen last few months isn't your dad. So Julie said, you can come home, but you sleep on a settee. And I wobbled home and I slept on a settee. And that night the door knocked and she opened the door and she went, come on. She said, it's freezing. She said, get in bed. So I got in bed and she gave me a cuddle. And I said, you know what, I said, I'm going to fight again. She said, but you can't walk. I said, I'm going to do my 4th Dan. And 6 months later, they bought me, stopped spending money on booze, started spending it on food, bought a lot of gym equipment, got me gym back, and started walking again. Walked first, then cycled, then ran. And 6 months later, I fought full contact with my 4th Dan. And I got it. Yeah. And then Jeff Thompson phoned me up and he went, there's your next book, kid. So that was An Everyday Warrior. That was that one.
Nice.
And so from there, people went, it's going to be a film. I went, hey, there's an idea. Get it into a film. So we tried for a while to get it into a film, and it was very difficult. We had a script written by someone, and then we eventually got in touch with a company in America, and it looked like it was going to happen, and COVID hit. So that kind of COVID just blew it
down again, yeah.
Put it down. So we just started now. We're speaking to a couple of guys, and one guy in particular is I don't want to say too much because when I've said it in the past, it hasn't happened, and I've maybe jinxed it a bit. I don't know. But we're talking to a guy now, and he seems serious, and I'm hoping in the next year these two these two are going to be a film, maybe a cinema film or a Netflix film, and that's where we want to come. And you know what? I want to do it because I want it to be a film, but I want it to do it for Julie. You know, I want to get that cruise through the icebergs for her because she's in there now. It's her mum's bloody 110th birthday or something tomorrow. And she's in there doing sandwiches for all the old people. So I'm hoping it's going to be a film. And we've been lucky with, you know, the stories travel throughout the world, and we've sold it, and we've been on the BBC, and we've been talking to good people like yourself, Lee, and people who've helped us get the story out there. But I think somebody asked me, if you could sum it all up in one word, a guy called Matt Jardine, a good jiu-jitsu guy who did a podcast with me from Oman. He said, do you have like anything you live by? And I think it's where there's courage, there's hope. So if you've got courage, you've got hope. So I went from that 5 years of age, getting spat in the face, to fast forward to fighting in front of Alfie Lewis, to fast forward to a man going to shoot me, to fast forward to going to get tortured and kidnapped and God knows what, and buried in the mountains in Dublin, to now making a film. You know,
like listening to your story there, Simon, from what the picture you painted from where you was in the beginning to what you are now is like a totally different transition, isn't it?
I like to think so. I like to, you know, you try not to get ideas above your station, if you like. I've been a lucky man. I've worked hard, but I don't like to blow my own trumpet. That's maybe for other people. I don't know, but I've been lucky. You know, I mean, I don't think none of this would have happened without Soft Girl Next Door. None of it, you know, without my wife. 13 she was when I first met her, 14, and we're in our 50s now, and we still hold hands when we're walking down the street, and she still tells me off when I need to be. But yeah, Lucci the other day said, "You're still smiling, but why wouldn't I smile? Touch wood, is there anything else that could happen to me that I can't deal with? You know, the IRA, the murder threats and all that." So
been a lot of stuff you've accepted, even like from an outside point of view, even the sort of the loyalty that your father didn't have for you must sort of take a toll on yourself, you know.
Absolutely, it very much did. When I was my daughter, if you ask me if there's one person ever looked after me in my life, it's my wife. But you ask me anyone that looked after me after my wife, it's my daughter. She's a bloody body. She has stepped over fences when I've had trouble. Age of 18, 19, she's a fighter. She's kickboxer. She's a Welsh champion. She has jumped over fences when I've had trouble and stood behind me. But when I came out of hospital, maybe 2 or 3 weeks after, my dad came to see me. And I'm doing the maths, and I think, listen, I can blame this, that, and the other. He's the problem. Yeah. And like, I remember watching Billy Connolly, and his dad abused him. My dad never did that. And, you know, Will said never. But Billy Connolly, and he's on the Parkinson show, said, even though his dad abused him, he was still desperate to impress him. Yeah. And I think, yeah, that's what I was like. Now, like I say, it was my lad's 3rd birthday, and my dad came to see my lad. And I looked at him, and I think, you're poison. And I could see my girl was 12 at the time, and she knew what my dad had done all this to me, and she's watching me. And I said to my dad, I'd like to leave now. He said, what do you mean? I said, I want you to get out of my house. Didn't raise my voice and all that. So I'd like you to leave. I said, I'm done with you. And you just got to go to work, have you? And I said, I'm going to work, but I'd like you to leave my house. I remember he started the Jag that he paid off. And I remember him driving out. And I remember my daughter watching me, Lee, and I could see she was wavering. And I said, you all right? And she said, are you okay, Dad? And I said, I'm not telling you off, Lou. I said, what you're asking me is, am I going to have a drink tonight? And she went, yeah. And I said, no. So let's go training. And we went training. And that's the last time I ever spoke to my father. Now, the weird thing is, and this freaked me out, yeah, he lived in a town 40 miles away, and this, that, and the other. We live in Llandudno now. Got a nice little rented bungalow. It's nice near the beach and all that. And when we moved here, this old Jag comes tottering towards us. And I thought, shit, it's me dad. And I said, look. So the Jag that he paid off 30 years ago, he's still got now, right? And there's, 30-year-old called, not wrong with that. He lives 2 streets away from us.
You're joking?
No. And the chances of that happening.
So, Simon, you are author of 6 books. Can you just give us a quick run through of them, of what they're about, and what they're called?
The flagship is the first part of my autobiography, if you like. That's From Bullied to Black Belt. That's got an introduction by Jeff Thompson, and that starts when I was 5, like we're going to talk about in the podcast. And then that kind of finishes when I like 2021. So that's our flagship. That's what people, if you like, they know us for. And then the sequel was An Everyday Warrior, which is obviously what happened later on, which is, involves the IRA and the gunmen, etc. That's kind of not as well known as From Bully to Black Belt, but we're hoping we're pushing that next. I've written a couple of children's books, Tabitha and the Bullies. A lot of my stuff is themed around bullies. We've just signed a book contract with a Canadian publisher for a book called Ki, which is a children's self-defense book. And that's hopefully out later on this year. I wrote a book called A Dragon on the Door, which is interviews with some of my friends and colleagues who've run the door in North Wales. There's 8 or 9 people in there, boxers, martial artists, etc., who've manned the doors of when you English people come down on holiday, they look after you. There's a man from Cockneys. And then I wrote a book called Dipping Your Toes in the Water, which is kind of, I don't like to use self-help. I don't know. It's about how you kind of, if you want success, you don't just jump in at the deep end. Like I went from traditional karate, which is non-contact, all the way through to Animal Day, which is full contact, and how I did that slowly, dipping your toes. And really, that's kind of like a growth book, if you like, of different scenarios of how you can get success. So they are the 6 ones. And I'm currently writing a book called I Bully, which is an adult book, and it's seeing things through the bully's point of view, because they do have a point of view. So it's narrated by the bully itself, and they are the 6 books.
Wow, amazing, great stuff. So Simon, if anyone's interested in coming to train with you or having a look at the stuff you do, where can they find you?
Well, our main dojo is our main academy is Fight Fortress in St. Asaph, about 10 miles from Rill. We've got another studio in Colwyn Bay, but mostly what we're kind of branching out to, we're going to other people's clubs to do seminars. We do 2 in particular, complete combatives, which is Krav Maga, wrestling, kickboxing, the whole stuff that I've done over the 40 odd years I've been training. And we kind of tack onto that, a thing called Despite the Fear, where because of what's happened to me, obviously I kind of know an awful lot about fear. And we talk to people about fear and how you overcome it, and that's called Despite the Fear. So if anyone's interested in hosting a seminar, we are hitting the road, so to speak, at the moment. Yeah.
Is there any websites or contact details people can contact you on?
www.simonmorrell.com. That's SIMON. I've forgotten how to spell my name. MORRELL.com. And we're on the usual Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever you bloody call it. We're on all the social medias. You'll find me. Put my name in and I'll pop up like this, smiling.
Lovely. Thank you, Simon. We're starting to wind it up there. Thank you ever so much for coming on and sharing your story. It's been great to listen to, and I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you. Thank you very much, Lee. God bless you. Thank you.